Hello. Today we visit an old Reddit thread and ask Reddit, what's the strangest coincidence you have ever personally experienced? Make sure to stick around until to the end to hear my personal favorite story. Yes, I have actually put it last. With that out of the way, sit back and enjoy. When I was a kid, around 13, I played a lot of a video game called Diablo 2. I started a clan with a few people I'd met on the internet and we played every day. At some point we were helping some random person and he asked to join. We thought he was nice enough so we let him in. As part of this clan we had a shared account we used to store game items for each other. After about a month of playing, this new guy goes in and changed the password, steals the account and defriends everyone. Completely disappears off the map with all of our stuff. Fast forward a year later and my family moves to Texas and it's my first day at school. I'm sitting in algebra class talking to the person in the seat next to me and he mentions he plays Diablo. I said me too and that I ran a clan and everything. I asked his username and it was him. 2,000 miles away from where I first virtually met this guy, he's sitting next to me in math class. When I told him mine, his face went into total shock and he didn't know how to respond. It was awkward for sure. Ended up telling him I didn't care and was over it and we didn't end up becoming friends. Probably thought you had tracked him down to exact your revenge. You blew your opportunity to befriend him, win his trust, gain access to his account, and steal all his shit. In freshman physics, I became friends with the Japanese kid next to me. After a while he was helping me with my Japanese homework, did really well after that, by the way. But after that class, we kinda drifted apart. Fast forward 2 years where I'm an exchange student in Japan over the summer and doing some sightseeing in Kyoto after the program. I'm crossing the street in Kyoto and I hear my name being called out. I look around and there he is. Thousands of miles apart we meet again. We got some drinks and good food together. It was a blast. No, his hometown was not Kyoto, he was also doing sightseeing while home for the summer. I met a Canadian guy while on holiday in South America and we ended up going sightseeing together. At the end of the day a person behind us tapped him on the shoulder and asked if the scar behind his ear was from cancer surgery. They got talking. Turns out they were from the same small town in Canada, had the same type of brain cancer and had been operated on by the same surgeon. Something's up with that town. No, nothing's up with it. It's just a coincidence that's the town just happens to be Cancerville, Manitoba. Welcome to Cancerville. Population, constantly multiplying. My favorites occurred during separate canoe trips. The first was during a Labor Day weekend trip up and down the St. Croix River, 2 days paddling upstream, one down, which runs between Wisconsin and Minnesota and eventually joins the Mississippi River. Despite it being a holiday weekend, there was virtually no traffic on the river, as we saw only one other boat and that was on the first day shortly after we left. On the second day out, the weather was quite warm. At one point I said, "Boy, a watermelon sure would be good right about now." My 3 companions told me to shut up and not even mention it, because we didn't have one and weren't going to find one in the wilderness. A little while later we spotted a green object floating toward us that turned out to be a watermelon. Years later I was on a river outing with several other people on the Whitewater River in Indiana. I was paddling my kayak, and had just told the watermelon story to the people in the canoe next to me. It was a hot summer day, and someone said something to the effect of, "Watermelons are fine, but I could really go for a cold beer right now." A few minutes later we paddled around a bend and saw a cooler sitting on a sandbar. We stopped on the sandbar, opened the cooler, and found that it contained just enough cold beers for each of us to have one. Appalachian trail hikers refer to occurrences like this as trail magic. I guess it happens on rivers too. Hey, let's go on a canoe trip. And at any point if you feel so inclined, please say, $1 million sure would look good in Tamisola one's account. I used to get 2 buses home from work. I got off the first one having left my phone and keys on the front seat of the bus without realizing. Got on the second bus, went to my favored front seat and my possessions that I didn't know were missing were waiting for me. The bus had changed driver and route. Still freaks my nut out to this day. In grade 10 English class, The teacher didn't have anything planned for us to do and it was close to the end of the year I guess, so she goes to the big Coupa board in the corner and pulls out a stack of copies. It's examples of a successful essay written during a final exam, so we can learn what a good one looks like and how to build a narrative, etc. The topic of these was what was the most pivotal moment of your life. There's 3 examples, ranging in proficiency. We read through the first 2, and I volunteered to read the last one aloud. I start reading. And I stop. The essay was about me. My big sister had gotten a really good mark 6 years earlier on her final exam essay which she wrote about the day I was born. I got pretty emotional about that one. I was at a convention. There were only a few people in the room. My friend and I wanted an autograph from a voice actor. He started singing in his character voice. There were 2 random guys next to me. One pulled out a video camera to record it. Years later, my husband and I are talking with friends, and the convention comes up. The guy with the video camera was my husband. I also took a picture later that day of the crowds, and he is in that picture. I stood next to my husband years before I met him. Was sitting in a restaurant about 200 miles from where I lived telling my mother, who was visiting from a different country about a trip I had to another country, about 6,000 miles away with a work colleague, and the lady at the table next to us leans over and says, "I think you're talking about my son." Turns out I was sitting next to my colleague's parents while showing my mom pictures of our trip. One night in university I was fooling around with my then GF and noticed that the brightness of the TV caused us to cast distinct shadows on the wall behind us. Being 19 and a fool, I took this opportunity to take a pic, using Snapchat of the shadow my erect penis made on the wall and sent the pic to my best friend. I thought it would elicit an interesting reaction but could not have prepared for what was next. You see, on Snapchat you can see when someone receives your message as well as when it's opened. So as my message is sending, still unopened by him, I receive a Snapchat from my best friend. I open it and lo and behold, what do I see? A shadow dick snap. This man decided at the exact same time that I did, to send an identical pic of his dick's shadow on the wall. Both of our girlfriends were confused, thinking it was some inside joke, when in reality we had never spoken of or sent shadow dicks ever before. Nobody believes me when I tell this story, but one day my husband and I ran into the same couple at 3 different places, in 2 different states. So my husband and I had an errand to run out of state. We leave early and stop to get breakfast. The couple was sitting across from us. The lady had on a funky shirt, which is why she stuck out in my mind. After breakfast we drive the next state over to the office we have an appointment at. We're waiting in the lobby and the couple from the breakfast joint walks in. Weird. So we spend the day finishing up our errands and then we drive back home. I didn't feel like cooking, so we stopped to get some dinner at the pub. We sit down at the table and guess who's already eating at the table behind us? The same friggin' couple. Not me, but a pretty interesting story in my family. 2 of my great-grandfathers got imprisoned in the same jail, and served time together. My great-grandfather on my mother's side was an architect and even drew my other great-grandfather's house. An officer from a different PD was showing me a picture of a guy they wanted to arrest in a different part of town. As I looked up from the computer, I see dipshit riding by on a bike. Literally 5 feet away from the squad car. "Officer, have you seen this man anywhere?" You mean that guy right there 5 feet from us?" Well, you have gotten to my personal favorite story. It is actually 2 stories from the same person, but these stories were quite satisfying. Here we go. Went to college, met a cute girl. "Where'd you go to high school?" she asks. "You've never heard of it," I reply. "I grew up in a town of 1,200 people, graduated in a class of about 90. Try me," she says. And that was the beginning of finding out that not only had she heard of it, she had almost attended it because her family had lived in one of the neighboring towns very briefly when she was growing up. We shared dozens of mutual friends, and had apparently spent our young lives narrowly missing each other. Later, after we started dating, we learned that one of our mutual friends had been trying to set us up with each other for years. She was overwhelmed with laughter when she saw that we were finally together, completely without her involvement. I asked her to marry me, she said yes. We went out to dinner with our parents so they could finally meet. Her folks arrive at the restaurant and see mine. Her mom goes, "Oh hey, my dad's name. So this is your son, huh?" They had been co-workers years ago. Of course. We've been married for 11 years now. Got a good thing going. We intend to keep it. Edit. I'm so glad you all enjoyed this. I love talking about my wife and have tons of wholesome stories like this. We do well because we each feel like we're the lucky one. Enjoy your day. Edit 2. By request of several commenters, I am adding one of my favorite stories of my wife and I in a comment below. It is a much cuter story. Please enjoy. Okay, some of you asked for another story. In 2006, I was living in a city I didn't like without a car and working a job I hated. The job was about 2 hours away by bus due to the number of transfers I had to make. I spent a lot of time reading to distract myself en route and away from work. It was late summer, but not very late. I was on my way back to the apartment I shared with my friends after a long shift and not looking forward to the ride home. Fortunately, I had Neal Stephenson's Cryptonomicon to keep me company for the ride. I also had my thoughts. It was a tough year. I had left a long-term relationship earlier in the year, which upended a lot of the stability and things I had taken for granted in my life. No car, new apartment, new dynamics with mutual friends. It had been a couple months and I had gone on a few dates with a girl I had met at college. I liked her and I thought she liked me, but I worried that maybe I was moving too quickly into dating, especially since she had left a long relationship earlier in the year as well. I've never known how to date, so I felt out of my depth and wasn't sure what was normal or abnormal in this situation. All the things that tend to be on your mind in a situation like this were on my mind as I walked out of work that day, towards the bus stop at the top of the hill. I had sent a few texts to the girl earlier, but she had seemed distracted. Oh well. Better to put it out of my head, I thought. I arrived at the stop at about the same time as the bus, boarded, and settled into my book. 3 stops after I had boarded, I heard someone talking to the driver and noticed we hadn't gotten back on the road yet. I didn't stop reading and didn't even look up until the sounds up front stopped being spoken to the driver and started being directed to me. "My name," said the girl at the front of the bus. I looked up and took what was probably a frustrating amount of time to process what was happening. After longer, I'm sure, than the other bus riders would have liked, I gathered my things and stepped off the bus with this girl, still quite in shock. She grabbed my hand and walked rapidly, pulling me along, to a side street where her car was idling. "I can't believe I had to stop a bus for you," she said as the bus revved past us. We got in the car and she pulled onto the main street. "I yelled to you while you were walking through the parking lot," she said, and I smiled a little. "And then I drove alongside you and yelled out the window," she said, and I smiled a bit more, warming to her adorable frustration. "And then you got on that stupid bus. I didn't know you were picking me up," I said, and she gave me a look that I've come to know very well over the years. "You were obviously having a really bad day. I thought it would make you feel better to go do something together." I reached out for her hand. "It really would," I said. "Where are we going?" She laughed. "Oh, no. I did my part. I stopped a bus for you. You get to choose where we're going." I nodded, and I gathered scattered thoughts into a clear picture. She was in it. "All right. I've got a good idea." We were married 2 years later. With that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for sticking all the way until the end and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment something down below. Literally comment anything as I look forward to reading it. Until next time.